Well, I guess the first thing you got to do is to know what you want. I mean, a lot of times, I think one of the problems we have in our culture, especially with young men, is, sort of doing some of this mentoring, is that they really don't know what they want. I mean, this is a real issue, especially in a very affluent society. When you've been to Disney World when you were 7 years old, and you've been skiing in Vail, now what? There's a now what? What do I really want? It's really, really difficult for a lot of people to really decide what they really want out of life. Whether you realize it or not, what you really want is to become a selfless person. And you do that by taking the hero's journey. And the most important thing is you've got to take that on faith and start acting on it. And this is your purpose in life. This is what you should really want. It isn't a matter of opinion. It isn't just all relative and who knows what. Now, this doesn't mean, like me, I've done tremendously all kinds of different stuff. I've been a blue collar. I've worked construction, and I've laid carpet, and I've been a moving van guy, and I worked on a railroad, laying track. I mean, probably done 100 different blue collar jobs. I've also been a CEO of a company and worked for MTV, et cetera. So all of this stuff, though, is a byproduct. You need that one singular mission that you really, really want. And that mission should be to become a selfless person. Or another way of putting it, to become the best human being you can possibly be. I mean, what else matters? I mean, to be the best person you can be is so important. I think people come back when I'm talking to people, their problem is, I'm not really inspired. That's not really resonating with me, or that's, whatever. And what they forget is that inspiration almost always follows action rather than inspires action. Back in 2011 or something like that, I went out to visit my brother in Denver, Colorado. And when I walked through the door, the first thing my brother Dan said to me is, "My God, you look terrible." He said, "Why don't you at least buy some clothes that fit you?" I was out of shape, overweight. I remember walking up the steps to go into town to watch a hockey game. And you're already at elevation in Denver anyway. So when I got home, I said, I gotta do something. And so I dragged my sorry ass to the gym, and I hired a personal trainer. Did I do that because I was inspired? No, I hated every moment of it. I didn't want to do it. I was tired. I wanted to leave me alone. But gradually, I've been working out 5 days a week ever since. I worked out at 6:30 this morning, and now I'm inspired. Matter of fact, the last thing I said to my coach, because we worked out extra early this morning, the last thing I said to him, I said, "Thanks for being willing to get up early for me this morning." I mean, he had a doctor's appointment, which was the reason why he had to work so early. But rather than him just canceling, he was willing to schedule at 6:30 in the morning. And I was willing to get up at 4:30 in the morning to be there at 6:30. Because I'm inspired. Because I've made the commitment. Because I've got so much invested at this point that I never want to go back to that slob that I was in 2010. So you have to just start putting one foot in front of the other, because the corollary to what I'm saying is, it doesn't matter how you feel. You have to be able to act on principle. You just do it because, it's your duty, because you must do it. I used to say the same thing every time I take a new job, especially in sales, they would always oversell it. They would always tell you it's going to be easier to make the sales than it really was. Especially early on, a lot of the jobs that I took meant a lot of cold calling and a lot of just hammering. And no matter how much cold calling you do, and believe me, I have done cold calling, it's never fun. It's never, it's something it's a discipline. It's something you just have to do to be successful. By the way, everything, no matter how much fun it is, has aspects that you're going to hate in order to be successful at it. And you have to have the discipline to do those. You may love to go to the driving range and golf and just pound balls, but you probably hate to stand on the putting green for hours on end. Or you may hate the dietary limitations you have to do, or the running you have to do, whatever. There's going to be aspects, so you have to be able to, as Richard Rose, my Zen teacher, said, you must be able to force yourself. The difference between the men and the boys are the men who can force themselves. The boys can't. So you have to be able to really put that investment in, even when you don't feel like it. I'd start this new job, and I'd always say to myself, This is going to turn out to be harder than you thought, than they told you it was going to be. Somewhere between now and 6 weeks from now, you're going to hit the wall. It's not going to be going as well as you thought. It's going to be harder than you thought it was going to be. Something's going to be terrible, whatever it is. And you're going to want to quit. So the most important thing we're going to do right now on day one is we're going to open this drawer on our desk and we're going to take our feelings and put them in there and close the drawer. Feelings don't matter. There's always going to be this voice in your head that says, oh, it's easier here. It's not fair. Oh, they're not treating, all the excuses. My old partner in my in my business, who I love, the guy, still love him, Jay Hall. I talk about him a lot in Business Secrets of the Trappist Monks. He would, every once in a while, he would get the whole sales force together. He would start writing on the whiteboard. The product's too expensive. There's too many recalls. Nobody's answering the phone these days. Nobody's. All right, we got all the excuses out? Good. Then he would erase them. Now this is going to work. And then the second thing you have to do is you have to be willing to put the effort and energy into it. You got to make the commitment. And you have to understand also that making a commitment is not the same thing as becoming committed. Making a commitment is the first day. I'm going to commit to, I buy a gym membership. So you've made a commitment. But you only become committed after you've at a certain point, if you put enough energy in, one day you wake up and realize, I'm committed. I couldn't quit this if I wanted to. And the more energy you put in, the more, what do we mean by this energy? The more sacrifices you make for something, the more committed you become. Why do you become more committed? Because you think, oh my God, it's like being on I don't know if you ever, some of you, maybe many of you, me, I know, have been on a diet. And you start on a diet and it's really, really hard, and you get 3 weeks in and suddenly it starts to get easier because you're committed. Why? Because when you go to pick up that piece of cake on the first day, well, you've only been on the diet 2 days or 2 hours. Well, I'll start tomorrow. It's easy. But if you've been on this thing, if you've been suffering for the last 3 months, you're saying, hey man, I'm not going to screw up what I just accomplished with this lousy piece of cake. That's when you're committed. And if everything becomes easier, the more committed you are, the easier it is to put more energy in and more energy in. That's one of how you accomplish what you want, by being committed to it. But most of all, you have to have a strategy for realizing that most of what you're going to want is going to come through other people. There's very little you can accomplish in life all on your own. So you need people skills. And unfortunately, they call them soft skills when they're actually the hardest skills. Because the vast majority of problems, when I became a manager and a CEO eventually, most of what I spent my time on was solving people problems. This guy's not getting the job done. Do you work around him? Do you get rid of him? If you get rid of him, what signal is that going to send other people? Are they going to understand why you're getting rid of him? Or is it going to sound like you're just arbitrarily firing people? Or you just didn't like him? Or, there's all these issues that come up with it, and they're all people issues. I found that 80% of my problems in my job were people issues at work. So you need people skills. If you want to get everything you want out of life, you need people skills. And the most important people skill you can have is the theory of mind. I remember the first time it's a psychological term. They say we're talking about the difference between chimpanzees and children. They said when a chimpanzee watches a woman washing the dishes, he will imitate the woman and he'll start doing it. But he doesn't know that he's trying to get the dish clean. A child, I forget how old the child had to be, but a child understands, the child puts themselves in the mother's position and realizes the mother's trying to get that dish clean, not just playing with the dish. Because the child has a theory of mind. The child has the ability to put himself in his mother's shoes. This is the most important people skill you can have. It's amazing to me that if everybody in a business or organization or in a church or really and sincerely treated other people the way they would like to be treated, or in some cases the way that person would like to be treated because they're different from you, 90% of all your problems go away in most cases. How many people don't like getting a thank you card? How many people don't like being given credit for something that they accomplished? How many? We all want somebody who says, no, don't give me the credit. It's Joe over there. I tell a story in my book, Not Less Than Everything, about how I went to this psychologist, and at the time, and the psychologist was, and I was bemoaning the reason I wasn't married. I was saying is because I couldn't trust women. I'm a man of stature. I'm a man of principles. I'm a man that does what he says he's going to do, and I'm an upstanding, and I would never let my wife down, and I'm afraid my wife would let me down. And this psychologist, he was a kind of a meek, mild little guy, but he got real quiet for a minute, and he turned around and he said, let me tell you something. Let me tell you something as a married man. You will let your wife down. You'll let her down again and again and again and again. And you'll do it primarily because you're thoughtless. And I get, I was devastated. He just ripped me a new one. And, but I still get the hair standing up on my neck when I think of that. That's all there is. You want a theory of mind, you want to get what you want. You got to have a theory. It's going to be through people. To get through people, you got to have a theory of mind. You got to be persuasive. You got to get people to come. How do you get people on your side? It's simple. Be thoughtful. Don't be thoughtless. But it's a lifetime's work. This is part of where we were 10 minutes ago when I said, become the best human being you can possibly be. Top-notch, the best people in the world are thoughtful people. They're thinking of other people rather than themselves. But overcoming our natural instinct to selfishness, to be more, oh, woe is me. People should be more thoughtful about my feeling, whatever it is it takes an enormous amount of work. It has to become a habit. Aristotle said we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence is not a choice, it's a habit. Thoughtfulness is not a choice, it's a habit. We're all scanning the environment looking for something. We talked about this in another video. Some people are always looking for the humor in it. Some people are always looking for, they're always in those army movies. There's the snooze hound. He's always looking for a way he can take us sleep. There's the chow hound. He's always looking for a way to get food. There's the scrounger. He's always figuring out some way to make a little money or get an extra pack of cigarettes or something like that. That's their default mode. That's how they're viewing the world. And you have to become a person who's viewing the world. How can I be helpful? How can I help other people? How can I be useful? And then, whoa, when you finally get to that point, everything comes back to you 10 times over in ways that you can't possibly anticipate. But it's so hard. One of the pattern that I've noticed in the people that I've started mentoring is they watch these videos, they watch my videos, they've heard all this, they really say they're really impressed, and the very first question they have is a very selfish question. How can I make more money? How can I get a promotion? And when they're thinking of a mission in life or a goal or something, it's very, very narrow. It's very specific. I want a job. We're very transactional. If I do something, I want to see results by the end of the day, or half an hour from now, or 5 minutes from now. We have a very, very short attention span, inability to invest for the long term. It sounds terrible for me to say this because it sounds very uncaring. But it's sometimes, for me, it's hard to believe anybody in America is not a millionaire. Because, especially over the last 50 years, the tiniest amounts of money invested in the stock market would have made, people a millionaire. But that's what Warren Buffett said. It isn't that hard to be a millionaire. All you need is a tiny snowball and a long enough hill. And so the compound interest just builds and builds and builds and builds. It's like Charlie Munger, his partner, said, the first $100,000 is the hardest. Once you get there, then that compound interest really starts kicking in. Next thing you know, you got 500,000, then you got $1 million. My dad raised 8 kids. When he retired in the late 90s, he was only making $37,000 a year. Most money he ever made. He sent 6 of us to prep school and all of us to college. and he died with a multi-million-dollar stock portfolio. I just did a back-of-the-envelope calculation that if my dad owned some Apple stock. He died in 2006. My dad owned some Apple stock. If he was alive today, his Apple alone would be worth $16 million. Forget everything else he owned. And I said to him, Dad, how did you do this? How did you do it with no money, with all the bills that you had to pay with us? Nickels and dimes. Just nickels and dimes. That's all it really takes. Same thing with becoming thoughtful. Same thing with everything you want in life. It's nickels and dimes. It's starting small. It's putting I remember how depressed I was when I first heard this. Once people would say to Mr. Rose, how do you reach enlightenment? How do you reach spiritual fulfillment? You put one foot in front of the other. You start today, you start now, and you put one foot in front of the other. How do you lose 50 pounds? You start now, and you put one foot in front of the other. How do you become a millionaire? You start now, and you put one foot in front of the other. How do you become a great golfer? You start now, and you put one foot in the other. Everything's the same. Well, what do you see in the stock market when you see a lot of the young people that we're talking about? They're all buying meme stocks and trying to do day trading and, make it. You'll be a millionaire by the end of the week. 95% of the people that trade options lose money. I mean, it's about patience. It's about investing for the long haul. It's about investing in yourself. And Buffett used to say that too. The most important investment you can make is the investment you make in yourself. To become a better person. To become the best person you can possibly be. And if you want that, if you really sincerely want that, everything else, it correlates with Christianity perfectly. Seek first the kingdom of heaven. And everything else will take care of itself. But it takes a tremendous amount of faith and a tremendous amount of desire to start behaving that way before the payoff comes, and to forget about the payoff. You really have to forget about the payoff. If you're doing it for the payoff, then you're still doing it for selfish reasons. You have to just be willing to make those investments. That's why I think a lot of people, when they're talking about inspiration all the time, they forget about maximum motivation is a optimization between inspiration and desperation. Nietzsche, in my youth, he was one of my favorite philosophers. I read everything he wrote. He said, the true spiritual light, and say spiritual, the philosophical life or whatever, starts in the hour of one's own great self-contempt. Mr. Rose had a much more succinct way of doing it. You gotta just get sick and tired of the bullshit. I mean, that's the way I felt when my brother said to me, "You look like hell, why don't you get some clothes that fit you?" I looked in the mirror and I said, I'm tired of I'm tired of this. I'm tired of it. The secret to Alcoholics Anonymous success is not inspiration, it's desperation. That's why really, really good teachers work on both sides of the equation. Like, what do they call that, in math when you're working both sides? You got to work both sides. Factoring, you have to work both sides when you're factoring. They're always offering you inspiration, but they're also holding up a mirror and saying, but guess what? There's still work to be done here. That's why when we see all these movies that we love, all these, movies with these, Yoda and all these gurus that are in these movies, the first thing they do is destroy the hero, Why would I even think to become your teacher, you low-level little piece of crap? You're lower than a worm. You can possibly look at yourself, you're a disgrace to the human race, They work both sides of the equation. Encouragement's important, but also we want that hunger, we want that drive, we want that desperation too. There's a lot of good that can come out of desperation. There's a lot of good that can come out of the fact when you get tired of the bullshit. When you really, really just get tired of the bullshit. I used to say to my college students all the time, one of the first classes we'd always have in the year, I'd always start with the same question. I'd say, are you taking the course of life for credit or are you just auditing? Are you taking life for credit or are you just auditing the course? And then I'd have them comment on it. It goes back to what Mr. Rose, and I wrote about it Not Less Than Everything, when Mr. Rose had the most fabulous comment, the highest praise. He was very critical of everything, of the human race and everything. He called them lemmings. He said his whole job was, he said, the vast majority of the human race is just lemmings rushing for a cliff. He said, I can't change the world. He said, all I can do is stand close to the cliff, and he says, maybe once in a while I can reach in and grab one by the hair of his head and pull him out before he goes over the cliff. But the highest form of praise he could get, he would just sometimes say about somebody, yeah, Joe, he's serious. He's serious. That was the highest form of praise you could get from Mr. Rose. If you want what you want out of life, you've got to get serious and hang around with serious people and find serious teachers. But all of this means you got to take a big step back and take, what we used to call back in the 1960s, go through an agonize and reappraisal, and really start back with the question you asked me 15 minutes ago. What do you want out of life? What is life all about? What would be a successful life? And the scariest thing to me when I was a very young man was just how easy it will be to waste my life. Of course, that initiated panic, and then at the flip side, that okay, what kind of life could I lead that would guarantee me that I wasn't wasting? I saw this in my father. I saw my father go into depression in old age, and I know I was talking to a really close friend of mine maybe a year ago, talking about this same thing in my book, and he just looked at me very calmly. He said, I wasted my life. And how do most people waste their life? By frittering it away. Stuff, just superficial stuff, just filling activities, just, I got to do this, and then I got to do that, and then I got to go here, I got to pick up my dry cleaning, and then I got to go over here, and then I got to meet this person for dinner, and then I got to remember to return this telephone call, and I got to stop at the grocery store, and I got to put some money in the bank so the check doesn't bounce. And next thing you know, you wake up, 30 years has gone by. One of the great things that Mr. Rose really inspired me when I was a very young man, he said the biggest obstacle to a spiritual life or to any kind of meaningful life is sleepiness. He said it's in the nature of the human beast to sleep. He said every human animal wakes up once in a while. He said takes his face out of the feeding trough, takes his straw-matted face out of the feeding trough long enough to sniff the air and look around and ask some questions about what's life all about. I found this in my life, and usually when people are drinking, that's when they start asking me questions about God and everything, which is when I don't want to talk to them about it. But he said, but then they fall back asleep again. He said, it's not a question of waking up. He said, we talk about this in The Hero's Journey, the call. It isn't enough just to hear the call. You wake up, you got to act. Because if you don't act, then you fall back asleep. You got to put stones in your shoe. Stay awake. You got to get other people around you to stay awake, because if you fall asleep. And he said the way most people, he said they fall back asleep like Rip Van Winkle. They sleep away the best years of their lives. And then they wake up again all right. But this time they wake up screaming. Oh my God, I'm 65 years old, I'm 70 years old, I'm 50 years old. But it is so easy to just fall asleep and just get caught up in the patterns of trivialities and, to quote Mr. Rose, inconsequential bullshit. But you got to get serious. So anyway, I rattled on enough about that. Since you got this far, I'm going to seize the initiative and ask you to subscribe to our channel. It really helps get the message out to other young folks who need to hear it. Thanks again, God bless, and I hope to see you next time.